Dealers, could there be untapped revenue on your lot? Protective Asset Protection works with dealers to unlock new revenue streams through reliable protection products across most vehicle types. Visit protectiveassetprotection.com/automotive news to learn more.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, August 14th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Tesla is tightening its grip on the EV market, even as the market itself shrinks. Public EV charging is getting much more reliable, and there's data to back it up. And Toyota's plug-in hybrid sales are through the roof, thanks to a change in regulations. Plus, AI is speeding up the F&I process. But is your dealership actually checking whether it works?
AI shouldn't be an autopilot, it should be your co-pilot, right? You have to always keep on looking at the model, just not expecting that it will work.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Tesla is dominating a shrinking EV market. According to new data from Mobility Global, U.S. electric vehicle registrations fell 11% in June to just over 100,000 vehicles. That's the ninth straight monthly decline. But Tesla bucked the trend, grabbing more than 60% of EV registrations. Legacy rivals posted a combined 31% drop. Still, June was the first month to crack 100,000 registrations since September, a signal the market may be finding a floor. We'll have more on the story in a minute with our own Lawrence Iliff. Meanwhile, public EV charging is getting more reliable, and drivers are noticing. That's according to J.D. Power's U.S. Electric Vehicle Experience Public Charging Study. It found that the share of drivers who couldn't charge at a public station dropped to 12% in the second quarter, the lowest in the study's 6-year history and down from 19% just 2 years ago. New high-speed chargers and larger charging sites are driving the improvement. IONNA, the 8 automaker charging network, topped DC fast charger satisfaction with a score of 807 out of 1,000. And Toyota's plug-in hybrid sales are surging, up 38% this year. It saw a 157% spike in July alone. The reason? When the Trump administration took away California's authority to set its own emissions rules, Toyota was freed up to sell plug-ins in all 50 states for the first time. Toyota says the RAV4 plug-in hybrid is leading the charge, up 64% through July. The growth comes as brands like Jeep and Chrysler are exiting the PHEV segment entirely. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Joining me now to talk more about the latest EV registration results and Tesla's surge is Lawrence Iliff, who covers Tesla and other EV makers for us at Automotive News. Lonnie, welcome back to Daily Drive.
It's great to be here.
All right, Lonnie, so despite 9 straight months of declining registrations, you note in your story that the numbers are actually beating the most pessimistic predictions for the year. How worried, if at all, should the industry actually be right now?
I think that it's kind of like a glass half full type situation, right? So you have 9 months of declines after you lose the $7,500 tax credit, right? Which was like, on a 36-month lease, that's $200 off your lease payment. That's a lot. And so, people were buying EVs because they were cheap and they're like, oh, well, yeah, maybe I'll try this thing. And now you have a situation where, it's been going down for 9 months, but at the same time, relatively speaking, it's been gradually going up. It hasn't reached, the point where we were before the tax credit. And so like at the worst, like in November, it was like 56,000 EVs. And now it's at, 100,000. So that's kind of, a big step forward. And then also in June, you saw that EVs made up 6.9% of the light vehicle market. And that's kind of getting back to the 7 to 8% or kind of maybe kind of the 8% region where we were, before the tax credit went away. So it looks like we're getting there. But at the same time, 6.9% of the industry for EVs in 2026 when Europe's at 25% and China's at 50%, that can be a little bit scary, right? We're not making the transition. We're kind of making the transition to hybrids. We're making the transition to more 4-cylinder engines and more efficient cars. But there's a big technical hurdle to get to EVs. And, the US is falling behind.
That's a great point, Lonnie. Now, Tesla's share of the EV market is now over 60%. What does that kind of dominance mean for the rest of the industry long term?
I mean, if you remember, when Tesla burst onto the scene and, at one point had even more than 60% of the market, had like 70% or 70 something percent. The only other people were like, the Chevrolet had the Bolt and Nissan had the Leaf and Hyundai and Kia had some cars that I think they only sold in California. And, GM and all these other companies came out and said, oh, yeah, we're going to beat Tesla. We're going to catch up to them, and we're going to pass them, and we're going to invest all this money. And, by 2030, we're all going to be at like 50% EVs or something like that. And if you look at that perspective, and Tesla, got down to about 45% of the market, and now it has 60% of the EV market, it's going the other direction, right? Tesla is dominating the market. Tesla is gaining share in the market. These legacy automakers are, they were down more than 30% in June if you just look at the non-Tesla brands, right? And so Tesla's not selling a ton more EVs. For the first 6 months of the year, they're selling about the same amount as they did last year. But it's the all those other companies, those nearly 36 non-Tesla brands that are selling way less. I mean, there's a bunch of brands that don't sell 1,000 EVs in a month. And, these were the companies that were going to do that. So it's pretty good news for Tesla. It's not fantastic news for Tesla because they're still flat. It's still a market that isn't buying a lot of EVs. So that's not great for Tesla. But at the same time, they've shown that through their brand recognition, through their software, through their charging network, and through their ability to put on incentives and offer free supercharging and, work the levers of the industry, they are able to maintain their sales in a down market.
All right. Lonnie, always insightful. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Coming up, AI is changing how dealerships handle financing. But if nobody's checking whether it actually works, that's a real problem. That's next on Daily Drive.
The results are in from J.D. Power's annual appeal survey, which measures how excited car buyers are about their vehicle 90 days after their purchase. One takeaway, customers are not impressed by infotainment systems that are getting too complicated. On this week's episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, we're joined by Frank Hanley, the Senior Director of Automotive Benchmarking for J.D. Power. Hanley spoke about the factors affecting owner satisfaction and how complicated technology could be turning consumers away from buying a premium vehicle.
The people who are defecting back from the premium brands to the mass market are those people who are doing the income stretch. I don't have as much money to spend. I can get the same content at a lower price, and that's where they're defecting back to mass market.
Meanwhile, consumers prefer EVs over gasoline-powered vehicles in almost every category. But across the industry, automakers struggle to find a balance between making technology useful without overcomplicating things. Join us for Shift, available this Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Dealerships today face tighter margins, shifting consumer expectations, and affordability pressures tied to broader economic uncertainty. At the same time, consolidation and digital retailing are changing how products are sold and supported. That's why many dealers are re-examining how asset protection fits into long-term profitability and business goals. For more than 60 years, Protective Asset Protection has worked alongside dealerships across the country, delivering trusted F&I solutions like vehicle protection plans, maintenance programs, limited warranties, guaranteed asset protection, and more, helping dealerships generate revenue while helping customers protect what matters most. In addition to protection products, dealers have access to programs, tools, and proven training designed to support a wide range of business models. From digital retailing capabilities to dealer wealth building programs, Protective's approach is centered on partnership, giving dealers the flexibility to explore what fits their operation today and how it may support growth over time. If you're a dealer and interested in tapping new revenue streams through protection products, get in touch. Visit protectiveassetprotection.com/automotive automotive news. That's protectiveassetprotection.com/automotive news.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. AI is moving fast in the F&I office. Lenders and dealers are adopting it to speed up approvals, tighten fraud detection, and smooth out the customer experience. But according to our guest today, the industry is moving faster than it's checking its own work. Tom Osherwitz is with Informed IQ, a company that works with lenders on document verification and AI compliance. He sat down with Automotive News senior retail editor Dan Shine to talk about what happens when AI models aren't back tested, why fraud is getting harder to spot, and what dealers should be asking their vendors right now.
Tom, thanks so much for joining me again on the F&I Friday edition of Daily Drive.
Glad to be here. Nice to see you, Dan.
You too. So AI, a great thing in automotive lending. Dealerships are, looking in the F&I office to implement AI to, speed up decisioning processes and, make the processes smoother and quicker for the customer. But Informed IQ has done some research into this, and it's, there has to be some pauses here to make some, not so fast, I guess. People say if you got clean data, you're all set to go. But you kind of say that's not necessarily the case. Explain.
Yeah, sure. So absolutely agree. AI is an incredible opportunity for the F&I office, getting the right package for the right consumer at the right time to improve compliance, to speed up the approval process. I'd also just note that it also creates some AI risks, right? Because you have, generative AI and you can a big rise in fraud. But I absolutely agree with you that it's just not plug and play. Just getting clean data isn't enough at all. Really, the dealer should think about scrutinizing the models and also understand the AI. It's simply not plug and play. You really do have to understand what you're using.
And does the F&I manager or someone at the dealership have that capacity, that knowledge to kind of really scrutinize the AI? I mean, I'm
Right. Great question. I mean, I think the thing is, really, I think part of it is just asking the right question, right? So when you're using a vendor or using a model yourself, think about where does the data come from? Is there procedures for checking for bias? Do you understand what the limitations of the model are? And the other thing, I think sort of the golden rule is keep on checking the outputs. A model may work on day one, it may work in testing, but there's issues of model drift, there's issues of hallucinations, and you really need to make sure that it continues to work as expected. And the other point I would simply make is that it's good to do that for all models, but with AI, you just have to remember, AI shouldn't be an autopilot, it should be your co-pilot, right? You have to always keep on looking at the model, just not expecting that it will work.
So if something isn't, back tested or challenged, what are the doomsday scenarios? What can go wrong if again, you're not really making sure that the AI is running as it should?
Right. So obviously, one of the things that we are concerned about in the industry is fairness and bias, and that the regulators look at that. And folks should think about the fact that whatever you're doing today, you're creating a record for the next couple of years of how your businesses work. So you just, have to make sure that just because it's a new tool that you don't abandon the same rules of the road that you've always looked at, like making sure that the thing works as expected. And the other thing I would say is that the rules sort of keep on changing. I like to think of sort of 3 generations of AI regulation. One is in 2024, it was like, hold off. Well, this is scary technology. Let's not use it. 2025 was, okay, it's good enough to have a policy. And 2026 is, guess what? We know you have a model. Make sure your vendor tests it. Make sure that they test it annually, and they need to give you proof.
Interesting. Okay. Are there legal ramifications if this goes off the rails a little bit for a dealership?
Absolutely, right? So, just in terms of, there's not only legal, but there's also business ramifications. So let's start with the business, right? Which is that if your model doesn't work as expected, you might be making decisions on your F&I products that are completely wrong, right? You don't want to use a tool that gives out bad results because it's bad for business. On the legal side, regulators and even plaintiff lawyers may be looking at saying, hey, are you discriminating in the way that you're providing your services? So absolutely.
And how does this also play into fraud? I mean, fraud is just exploding. There's AI to fight fraud, but there's also AI to commit fraud. In the bad actors' hands. How again does kind of not having clean data but also having it challenged and back tested, how does that also kind of feed into this fraud risk?
Right. So I think that with generative AI in particular, you're now seeing fraudulent income documents, you're seeing fraudulent bank statements, you're seeing things that consumers can literally create using various AI tools, and they look real. And often they're impossible to detect with the naked human eye. So the way to think about this is, how do I stop this? And there are tools in the industry, and full disclosure, Informed is in this space where you can use cross networks to industry information to see if this information has been used before. If, I like to think of it as footprints in the sand, data that has been used in transaction. Often, if it's stolen, you'll see it if you have access to the right data.
And for the dealership F&I manager, again, should they? I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Should they rely on their vendor to tell them, him or her, everything's working fine, or is there a way for that manager to also kind of check as well?
Well, such a great question, even though it's obvious. I think the rule of the road is, as I said before, any question you would ask of your own use of a AI agent or your own use of an AI model, you should ask your vendor the same question. So, ask them, what are the limitations of your model? Have you checked for fair lending, and have you checked for biases? Have you tested for outputs in the past? Are you regularly checking for outputs? And then, by the way, trust but verify. Look at their outputs.
It kind of leads into my last question, which is, that's one very important thing that dealerships need to do on a continual basis to make sure their AI is working the right way and not injecting bias into decisions, et cetera. Overall, are there other things that dealerships need to be thinking about, kind of have this good governance of the AI tools that they use?
Well, I think that in the last year, looking from the financial regulator perspective, there's new guidance that came out called SR 26.2, and it affects the lenders that the dealers are working with. And since they're providing these packages to lenders, it's probably be good to understand the basic rules of the road. And one of the things that guidance says is you're accountable for your decisions. So definitely, if you have a compliance person on your team, ask them to look up SR's 26.2 and see what the new rules are.
Great. Tom, great conversation. Really interesting stuff. AI, again, is, can do wonders, but it's also, you just can't let it loose in the dealership. You really have to kind of keep it in check and make sure that it's working the way it should be.
Absolutely. It has to be your partner and not your driver.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks, Tom, for your conversation.
My pleasure.
Tom Osherwitz of Informed IQ spoke with our own Dan Shine. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Lawrence Iliff, Larry Velaquette, and Jack Walsworth for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on EV registrations, Toyota's plug-in hybrid surge, AI in the F&I office, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back over the weekend for our weekend drive edition of the show. Our own Larry Velaquette and Michael Martinez break down the week's biggest news stories, including Toyota's plug-in hybrid surge.
From an engineering standpoint, they make perfect sense. 90% of a driver's trips could be handled with the range that a PHEV offers if they're willing to plug in.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.